gentlemen, councillors, and welcome to this evening's Development Management meeting. If we move on to the agenda, first of all, apologies and substitutions.
We've got apologies for absence from councillors Sue Long and John Stratton.
Sue Livings.
Sorry. And we've got substitutes, Councillor Simon Carter and Sven Evans.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? No. Thank you very much. Minutes which appear on pages 3 to 5 of your agenda papers. Are they all agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Are there any matters arising? No. Thank you very much. Written questions, we have none. The procedure that we'll use tonight, I'm slightly amending the procedure as there is a councillor who wishes to speak on the application. I don't know what's making that noise. It's in my pocket. Stupid IT. Anyway. Yeah. Let's turn it off. Hopefully it will stop making noises. Right. First of all, the planning officer will present the report. Following that, there are possible 3 speakers against the application and 3 for. Each speaker will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. Comments will then be invited from the agent, again for a maximum of 3 minutes. It will be given at least 24 hours notice. Following that, councillors will ask questions of officers and seek clarification. Following that, officers will respond to those questions, and then we will debate and make a decision. So if we move to item 7 on your agenda papers, which appears page 6 to 30, which is number 17 Burnt Mill. Mark, if you could make a report. Thank you.
The application before you is for the demolition of the existing motor dealership buildings and their replacement with 172 residential units, 1,155 square metres of office floor space and 159 car parking spaces and landscaping. A very similar application was approved by the Planning Inspectorate for 142 units at the site. It is also worthy of note that a scheme from 2013 has already been commenced on site and could be built out. So here's the site start. The Burnt Mill employment area is on both sides of 5th Avenue, but this is the principal part of the site, of the employment area, I should say. The train station is up here, Elizabeth Way is to the south, and 5th Avenue is to the east there, and down at the bottom right is the town park. Just like the previous scheme, the building is roughly L-shaped, which you can see more clearly on the next slide. The office would also be at ground floor and first floor, and residential units would be at first floor and above. So on the next slide you can see the shape more clearly. The purple element is the office space, and the rest of the colours are the residential units. The key difference between the schemes is the increase in height of part of the building. Up to 10 stories have been approved and up to 15 stories are now proposed. The additional stories are in the tower element to the front of the site, which is this bottom right one here. This goes up further, and you can see that more clearly here. So the key differences are the increase in height of this section here. The commenced and appeal schemes are key material considerations which must be taken into account, and the differences between the appeal and the proposed schemes are considered to be slight. The taller design of the proposal would have better proportions and be more visually appealing than the previous schemes. There are 45 trees proposed, and the appeal scheme would have 28. As the increase in height would be limited to the tower and the building would be over 50 metres from the nearest residential properties, which are on the other side of Elizabeth Way, the impact on amenity is considered to be acceptable. A transport statement has been submitted which concludes that there would only be 10 additional trips to and from the site at peak hours, which the Highway Authority says is not significant. Where measured against the parking standards, 40% of the residential requirement would be provided, and the appeal scheme provided 44%. The amount of parking for the office use would stay the same. It is not considered that the very slight reduction in residential parking would warrant refusal of the scheme, especially given its sustainable location. Refusal of the application for this reason, or because of accessibility or pedestrian safety, would likely be considered unreasonable by the planning inspectorate. Refusing the appeal scheme for these reasons was unsuccessful. Viability information has been submitted, and this information has been assessed by the Valuation Office Agency for Harlow Council. It has been agreed that the scheme would be viable with contributions towards education and healthcare and the provision of 16 affordable homes, which is an increase from 12 for the appeal scheme. 7 would be affordable rent and 9 would be shared ownership. And this mix of types is considered preferable, but if an affordable housing provider wishes not to adopt the affordable rented units, then 20 shared ownership units could be provided instead, which would also be acceptable. The council refused the appeal scheme due to insufficient affordable housing provision. However, the planning inspectorate awarded costs against the council for doing so. Refusing this application for the amount of affordable housing proposed would be unreasonable. It is considered that the scheme before councillors is an improvement over the approved development, especially in terms of its design and the amount of affordable housing. And as with the previous scheme, it is considered that the development would increase housing supply, provide the mixed-use scheme on the brownfield site, and ensure the use of the employment area for employment purposes. Accordingly, the officer's recommendation is one of approval, subject to the applicant entering into an appropriately worded Section 106 agreement and the conditions as set out at 20 to 24 of the agenda to reflect the terms of the appeal scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I've got 2 speakers against. Could I call Councillor Vince forward, please?
Thank you very much, Chair.
You'll take a seat and pull the microphone towards you and turn it on. I have 3 minutes.
I won't need 3 minutes. Thank you very much, and apologies, I'm new to this. My confusion. I just want to raise my concerns, obviously I'm a rural councillor for Little Farm in Hare Street. I just want to raise my concerns about this particular development. I know some of the conversations that we've had, and I've listened to what the officers had to say. My concern certainly is with the increase in the amount of residential units that are being proposed compared to the amount of car parking spaces available. As a ward councillor, I spent a lot of time speaking to residents, and one of the biggest concerns is parking. I think this is going to be a disaster waiting to happen in terms of parking. I'm also concerned about the lack of affordable housing. I don't think there's enough in that development, and also the effect that this development is going to have on traffic around that area. That particular roundabout in the mornings, and most rush hour, is already to capacity. I'm not convinced that this development will only increase capacity by 10 cars. I think that we need to really look at this. I think it's going to be a very damaging development for this particular area of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vince. John Wake, would you like to come forward? And you'll have 3 minutes. Turn the microphone on. Thank you.
Right, this would be the tallest block of purpose-built flats in Harlow, 15 stories, 172 flats. Compared to the previous application, there would be 50% more floors, 21% more flats, 22% more residents. This represents a substantial change, and Harlow Council has a good case for refusing. It's envisaged that a total of 588 adults will occupy these flats, a large majority of own cars. This area near the junction 3A roads already suffers from gross traffic congestion. So this idea about 10 additional trips, I think, is absolute rubbish. If it's going to be 588 people, they're going to use their cars in the rush hour. So there'll be 22% more motor traffic than in the previous application, and it will exacerbate congestion, which is contrary to policy ER6 of the adopted replacement Harlow local plan. And also, there's only 159 residential parking spaces provided for 588 potential users of cars. Rivermill's a restricted parking zone. It's got horrendous congestion. The grass in front of my block of flats opposite has already been destroyed by illegal parking. The verges along with Elizabeth Way would also be destroyed by illegal parking should this go ahead. There's zero provision for social housing, and there's minimal affordable housing. So therefore, under H5 of the adopted replacement plan, you can reject this. There's no provision for open space and inclusive playgrounds or play areas, but because there's there's multiple bedroom flats, it's inevitably there'll be children living here. So contrary to policy L2 of the adopted replacement plan, there's no space for children's playgrounds. And also, according to the replacement local plan of the Harlow Design Guide, the National Planning Framework, and the BE2 and BE1, the overall design has got to relate to the setting to strengthen, enhance, protect or create local character. And it does not do that. It would be detrimental to the character and appearance of the area. So basically, I'd say this must be rejected.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wake. Could I call forward Mr. Simmons, please? Mr. Simmons, if you could take a seat, turn the microphone on, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Danny Simmons. I'm from RPS and I'm the planning consultant acting on behalf of the applicant. As has been made clear to you this evening, the appeal decision of September 2017 is highly material to this current application. And with the utmost respect, you do not need to re-examine matters that have already been determined by way of the appeal. Importantly, the principle of a residential-led mixed-use development is clearly established on this site, both by the appeal decision and also by an earlier scheme subject to a planning permission in December 2013, which has been lawfully implemented. Accordingly, policy matters and the suitability of the site are not at issue. In terms of the changes arising from the current proposals, I wish to highlight the following to you. First, the tower element of the scheme has increased in height from 10 stories to 15. However, as accepted by your officers, this is beneficial in townscape and design terms. And indeed, as concluded by the committee report, we agree that the proposed scheme is of a higher quality than the earlier schemes. The level of car parking proposed remains appropriate for this sustainable location. And in terms of car parking and overall highways issues, you will note that the County Highways Authority are happy, and also you should note the conclusions of the appeal inspector, who agreed that a lower level of car parking is acceptable in this location. In overall terms, we are of the opinion that these proposals bring forward a number of significant benefits which weigh in favour of the application. First, much needed housing, now 172 units, which is important especially within the context of the Council's challenging housing requirements. Secondly, affordable housing. And you should note that both in numerical terms and also in percentage terms, these proposals provide for an increase in affordable housing over and above the previous scheme. And notably, the level of affordable housing has been agreed with your council's own consultants. And third benefit, a high quality gateway development in a sustainable location. So for those reasons, I trust you'll agree that the current proposals have merit. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Councillors, questions? Councillor Clark, microphone please.
Sorry, just my question about the trees.
trees.
thinking about the protection of trees, there are trees in the front. There's a picture there with a few trees, but what loss of trees are there?
For the previous scheme, I think there was a loss of 1 tree. It's very similar for this scheme, and I think the crucial point is that 45 are now being proposed, whereas the previous one had 28. And we are we're recommending conditions to do with protection for the existing trees to make sure that they're not harmed by the development.
Stevens, two of you.
Thank you. I'd just like to know if they are going to put in a sprinkler system. 15 stories is quite high, and in view of the current attitude towards fire precautions, I think they should be doing so.
The fire service didn't actually comment for this application, but they did do for the previous one, and I think an additional plan was actually provided for that previous scheme. Their comments for the previous one were that the sprinklers, automatic water suppression systems, etc., are all dealt with at building regulations stage, and they're happy for it to be done at that stage. It wouldn't really be appropriate for us to require them if the fire service weren't actually requiring them now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Pleased to note that all of the properties are going to be wheelchair accessible, at least to level 2. But I did wonder, as a matter of good practice rather than building regs, whether there's any provision for charging bays for electric wheelchairs. They're a sort of growing phenomenon these days. And certainly if you're aiming to make all properties wheelchair accessible, there is a fair chance that people with wheelchairs may use it, and some of those people may well have electric ones. And where else they'll be able to charge them, I don't know.
Any questions? Debate? It's working debate. Councillor Garner.
Where does one start? I could go on for a long time, but I think I've been 16, 17 years on this committee, and it's the first time I feel I've been trussed up like a chicken, and I can't do anything about the development. I think it's in the wrong place. It's not providing affordable houses, it's not providing the car parking, it's not providing the open space for the children, and it's given huge congestion in that corner. I note the inspector made that there is currently no accident problems on that stretch of road. Well, there will be now. That number of people, there's no zebra crossings getting across the road. There are 2 pelican crossings. I want to vote against it, but we're threatened with costs again. And I think, the developers having their cake and eat it, they're going to get their costs from the appeal last time, and they're going to increase their profits on this. And I'm all free enterprise, but they're going to increase their profit on this with another 5 floors. I think it's totally inappropriate development where it is. I can only protest about it, and I think I'm going to sit on the fence for once in my life. I'm going to abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I too have got reservations about this. I understand on the original application to build there was provision for crossings across the road. There's none now. And I'm really concerned about the danger to residents that live there, and particularly children that have to go across a main road to get to school. I know this has been said before, but I still feel really annoyed about it. The public transport links, as far as I understand, there's only buses in the morning and in the evening from the station to the town centre. That may be wrong, but I think that's the case. No social housing again, and no play areas for the children. I mean, that is actually disgusting, that the children have to be playing in the streets if they want to play anywhere. And I actually came to the meeting where the inspector was made a decision on this when it was appealed, and I've never seen anything like it in my life. And I think that the way that he said it was professional arse kicking is what the people were licking, I mean. When they were asking the inspector or putting the case to the inspector, and it was actually disgusting. So I think we've got our hands tied, but I think it's absolutely ridiculous, a ridiculous place to build, and I think we're going to have problems. I think we're going to have people knocked down, and I'm really concerned about that. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Yes, I agree. I mean, first of all, I think it's a new application because it's considerably, significantly bigger, and also the 10 stories have increased to 15, much taller. However, Essex County Council said that the developer should ensure safe direct walking and cycling routes to local schools, whereas the routes to schools are far from safe, as Essex itself has established. It's never taken up the office, as Bob has said, to provide crossings there. It's not safe for adults, let alone children. Actually, if one reads the Star today, there is a discussion on accidents and indeed a death on Elizabeth Way. So there is evidence, without looking too far, for the lack of safety as it stands now, without adding to the amount of traffic. The inspector has argued that there are crossings in plural. Well, the only crossing that exists or the only safe crossing is actually the A414. Otherwise, to get to just basic amenities, basic infrastructure, you have to cross Station Road, Edinburgh Way, or Fieldgate Mill Access Road, or Elizabeth Way. There is no safe crossing at all other than the A414. It's an inappropriate place for housing, as has been argued already. These are mostly 2-bedroom flats, so there will be children. There's no open spaces, no playground space for 10 or more dwellings, as is our policies, and so that infringes our policies. The car parking, as has been pointed out, is inadequate, 44%. So people will be searching for spaces either in the Burnt Mill area or in River Mill. Excuse me. And even the inspector has argued that it's below standards. The major flaw, which I'm aware we can't use in argument, but is that we have a policy of 33% social housing, and again they have drawn on, and it's a very, very cynical use of the government loophole of viability to argue that it's unviable, 99.3% viable. This is completely inadequate, and it is cynical, as I've argued. Now, I would suggest that I still think we should oppose it, and I think we should oppose it on grounds that have not been fine, haven't been used before, or modify them.
Councillor Clark. Williams. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. I know much has already been said about we don't want this, but I still feel, for the sake of the people who've come along and expressed their horror and objections, as many as possible should say that we don't like this and would not really wish wouldn't really wish to approve it and pass it, but I see no planning grounds, and we've already lost an appeal once, so it is not possible really to reject it, so I will vote for it. The only hope is that as these are for sale, nobody is in any way coerced into going and living there, and there is just the one hope: nobody buys them.
Councillor Harlow.
Thank you, Chair. This has been going up and down for a long, long time now, this site. And we thought we got the right decision last time, but as things turned out, the inspector went against us. I feel the same way as everybody else here. As far as the car parking is concerned, perhaps the idea is that not everybody has a car there, because you've got buses at the bus station side of the train station, and there are quite a few that go up and down. Cycling, you know, all this sort of thing, disabled, but people still want to use their cars, so they will want to put them in there. And there is a problem with that. The design is better than the last one, but it couldn't have been any worse. So from that aspect, it has improved. But I've still got problems with, and as has been said around the table, with the safety aspect. I know the town park is not far away, but to get to that town park, you've got to cross several roads. And that is dangerous for children and the parents alike. But I think we are stuck with this. It's got to be sorted out, but it's certainly not affordable housing. The social housing aspect is not there. The viable angle is coming back in. Hopefully in the future, the viable word will not be able to be used by developers. They'll have to go back to what we had before, and that can't come soon enough. I will be voting for it reluctantly, because like Evan said, planning-wise, it'd be difficult to put it through on the objection side of that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harlow. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. When I saw this one originally, I was automatically against it, and having seen it again, I am still against it. This is not one I agree with at all. Everything that everyone else has said around this table, I cannot disagree with at all. I've always loved about this committee that we can sit and look at an application, create our own opinion, and not have our hands tied by anyone. I now feel I've been completely tied up, trussed up, possibly like a kipper. I feel that I have got I can't object to this because of what we've had to go through, but I'm not going to vote for it either. So I'm actually going to abstain because I cannot in my heart of hearts vote for this because I really don't like it at all. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Johnson. Councillor Carlton.
Thank you, Chair. Should be slightly controversial and say there are some aspects of this application which I don't object to. People are saying it's the wrong place to build houses. Well, it's only across the road from Riverman. So just across the road from the new development, you've got roundabouts being built further down the road. The area is full of housing and mixed use. The applicants come up with an improved design of a building, which is going to be a sort of landmark structure on the way into the town, which has always been one of the cornerstones of the design guide, and even going back to Freddie Gibbon to have landmark buildings. We've had the Hughes Tower and Edmonds Tower marking the town centre, for example, and they're 11 stories. Parking, I'm not unduly concerned about. Car ownership is falling amongst younger people. It's right next to a railway station. It's probably 10 minutes walk to Sainsbury's, so it's not all that inaccessible. However, where it does fall down, and I'm very surprised, that's all, no one else picked it up either on this application or the previous application, is it does seem to contravene policy L2 about open spaces and playgrounds and play areas. A number of members have already referred to the fact there's going to be no open space or no play areas within the realm of the development. Now, we're assuming something up to 20 primary age children and probably about 13 or 14 secondary age children being in that site with nowhere to go. Yes, it is convenient for the town park across several busy main roads, but there is none actually on that, which is contrary to L2. If we're sort of stretching around for grounds to object to it, I'm surprised no one's actually thought about it.
Could I just bring Mark in to respond to that?
This was raised at the previous committee, and it was included as part of one of the reasons for refusal. It was wrapped up in the the accessibility argument because of the town park. The reason why it wasn't a contribution towards open space wasn't required before and it isn't now is because we're bound to we can only ask for open space a limited number of times under the community the sill regulations. Basically, we have very limited opportunities to secure additional money for open space at the moment, and there are obviously bigger sites that will be coming forwards, which it would be better to use those opportunities for than this one. The scheme, this was raised for the previous scheme that went to appeal, and the planning inspector has said that access to the spaces, to the town park spaces, were fine, and he rejected the appeal on that basis. So it has been assessed before, and the inspector had said that that aspect of the scheme was okay.
Councillor Edwards.
Can I ask him that?
Tony Michael,
Yes.
sorry.
I'm new to this committee, so therefore can I ask a naive question? I mean, there's obvious concerns about this development. There seems to be concerns we've picked up in terms of children's play facilities. We've picked up on the issues around safety. We've also picked up on the issues about the amount of social housing. Now, I appreciate that in terms of the social housing, there's probably very little we can do in terms of that, in terms of the viability. However, on the question of amenity and also on the question of road safety, what I'm wondering, I'm just wondering, is it possible for us to defer making a decision tonight, and for there to be further discussions with the developers about what we can do in terms of addressing some of those issues, whether it be I mean, I'm thinking off the top of my head now, whether it be putting footbridges in or whatever it may happen to be to address those particular safety issues.
The Highway Authority has not asked for any of those things. They're saying that the accesses around the site are acceptable. This whole issue on accessibility and connectivity was raised before. This was one of the reasons for refusal, and the inspectorate walked the site and found that accessibility was not a reason worthy of refusing the scheme.
I suppose all I would say is, whilst on the one hand they may have found them acceptable, councillors around in Harlow obviously don't see it as acceptable. And what I'm therefore questioning is whether or not, rather than to make a decision tonight, whether or not we could defer with a view to come back again to see whether or not there's any way that at least those areas could be strengthened, irrespective of what Essex County Council or wherever the highways authorities are saying about that. There are some major concerns here.
I think we could only do that if the developers were willing to do that, and I'm not sure if they are. So I think we need to make a decision on what's in front of us tonight, because otherwise we'll potentially be going for non-determination.
What does that mean? Sorry, Chair.
It means we'll end up in court again.
Right.
Okay, any more debate? No? Okay, all those in favour? For? Against? 1? Abstentions? Does that mean I need to vote? No?
No.
Cool, in that case it's carried. Thank you very much.